Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Ashley Sayers, who is from the Rogers Historical Museum.
So my name is Ashley Sayers. I'm the education manager at the Rogers Historical Museum. And we do have probably one of our most favorite exhibits we've ever done. Last Call, History of Alcohol in the Ozarks. It is on display right now. For my talk, I kind of narrowed it down just a bit because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of information that goes on when discussing our relationship with alcohol here in the Ozarks. I really like pop culture, so one of the topics from the exhibit that I focused on was pop culture and how it relates to alcohol. So we're going to talk about hillbillies, moonshine, and pop culture today. So I looked it up, and the definition of hillbilly, according to Merriam-Webster, is a person from a backwoods area. And the folks from here in the Ozarks, as well as other places, have definitely been known as hillbillies. The stereotype of a hillbilly is a poor whiskey maker, whiskey drinker, and over the years, as you can imagine, it has become exaggerated. Through the pop culture that we have here in America, through movies, posters, music, you name it. So today, we're going to look at some of these ways that it has gotten exaggerated a little bit. We're just going to go through a lot of years for it. The stereotype of the hillbilly can really be seen as early as the 1800s. During this time, we had a traveling storyteller named Sanford Sandy Faulkner, and he began telling the story of the Arkansas traveler, which is thought to have occurred in the 1840s in the Boston Mountains here in northwest Arkansas. In the story, you have a well-to-do traveler that comes across this simple cabin and its inhabitant, who is a hillbilly. He plays the fiddle. He sells whiskey for a living. Well, this story really grew in popularity. And as the years passed, it was put to music in 1847 with the name The Arkansas Traveler and Rack and Sack Waltz. There's a lot of people that were given credit for different parts of the song. William Cumming was given credit for arranging it, but no one officially received credit for composing it. There were a lot of different names thrown in there, but nobody officially got credit for it. The Arkansas Traveler has proven to be a very popular song throughout the years. It's become one of the most recorded songs in American history, and it's even been included in a recorded arrangement that was performed by the Boston Pops Orchestra. It's also one of our state songs here in Arkansas. It is our state historical song, and it was adopted by the General Assembly in 1987. So we wanted to make sure we included this in our state symbols and in our history. Now, the story and the song, they had been around for several years when someone decided we need to make a painting of the Arkansas Traveler. Well, that happened in 1856 when this man, Edward Payson Washburn, who is an Arkansas native, he decided to paint the Arkansas Traveler based on the story and the song. So in the painting, you can see the traveler has stopped at the cabin and is trying to have a conversation with the man who lives there. And you can see above the entrance to the cabin, there is a sign that says whiskey, just so you know for sure that that man is selling whiskey. So this painting just really helped further solidify that hillbilly stereotype that we were already getting through the song and through the story. Later, the painting was copied to a lithograph in 1859 by Leopold Groslier, and it was published by J.H. Buford and Sons. Years later, another lithograph was made of the Arkansas Traveler in 1870, this time by Currier and Ives. Most people probably couldn't tell you who Leopold Groslier was, but people have heard of Currier and Ives, so that's a pretty big deal. If you come to the museum and visit our Last Call History of Alcohol in the Ozarks exhibit, you can see a ceramic plate that was made in 1936, and it is printed with the Arkansas Traveler painting. The plate was made to help celebrate the 100th anniversary of Arkansas becoming a state. And in addition to the painting on that plate are the music and the lyrics to the song. So it's just another way that we've solidified this image of the Arkansas Traveler and the hillbilly. Now, going into the 20th century, it's pretty safe to say the stereotype of the hillbilly was not positive. It was negative. But there were some performers that used that stereotype in their favor. And they were basing their comedic stylings off of the hillbilly stereotype. You have a good example is Robin Bob Burns, who is actually a Van Buren native. He was a comedian that he had been in movies, and then in 1941, he had his own radio show. He called it the Arkansas Traveler. Later, it was called the Bob Burns Show, so he changed the name of it a little while later. Well, on the radio show, he had characters that he created that were a family of hillbillies. And those characters were, you had Grandpa Snazzy, Aunt Pootie, Aunt Boo, and Uncle Slug, who was the drinking uncle. So you have these four characters, these four hillbillies, and on each episode, he would tell stories of the adventures that the family went on. So it was really popular. He also published postcards that went along with the show, as well as dolls that depicted the family members. And you can see one of those dolls in our exhibit at the museum. So that's just another way it infiltrated into pop culture, being really popular with the postcards and the dolls as well. Now, we can't really talk about entertainment without talking about movies and television, especially as you go even later into the 20th century. So movies started becoming a really popular vehicle for having stories about moonshine and stories about hillbillies. Because you're coming out of this time when you have the stories in the newspaper about the gangsters and all of their illegal activities. So those are the movies that people wanted to see. They wanted to see people doing all of this illegal stuff. So one of these popular storylines, of course, was making moonshine. And the movies would portray hillbillies as poor people who had absolutely no choice but to make moonshine and break the law. It's the only way they could survive and make a living. People loved those movies. Well, in the 1950s and 1970s, moonshining and running from the law still was a very popular storyline, but only now we have faster cars. So we had even more car chases. They were more daring, more thrilling, because those cars were faster than they were in the 1930s. Some of these popular movies, in 1958 we had Thunder Road, where they're running from the law with their moonshine. And then, of course, in 1973 we had White Lightning, with Burt Reynolds. So he would go on to make many movies that had him running liquor and running from the law. It was a very popular storyline for him. You even had tales of people making moonshine and running from the law on TV, with, of course, the Dukes of Hazzard. That ran from 1979 till 1985, and this one, of course, had those lovable cousins who were running from the law while they were transporting the moonshine that their uncle made. Dukes of Hazzard even became so popular it was a movie in the 2000s, so it's still a popular storyline. People still like those stories and those characters, and it's just still very, very prevalent. Now, the hillbilly is so prevalent in our pop culture that it has become a mascot, especially for a local high school. So you have our Mounties from Rogers High School. Well, before 1935, Rogers High School had no mascot. They just didn't have one. Well, Rogers High School decided they needed a mascot. So what they decided to do to choose a mascot was they wanted to have a writing contest. So the students could write in, they could suggest their ideas for a mascot, and the winning mascot was a hillbilly character named the Mountaineer. It was designed by Bernice Price Kinsey, and so the image of the Mountaineer has not really changed much. So he had a floppy hat, he had tattered overalls, bare feet, a shotgun, and a corncob pipe. He started being called the Mountaineer. We now call him the Mountie. There's the Mounties now. It's much shorter. But this mascot, he has become beloved among the high school students, past and present. And sometimes in the Mountie's image, a moonshine spirit jug was also included in the image. And they would even have a jug, an actual jug, that the cheerleaders would use in their celebrations, like at pep rallies. They would have it with them on the sidelines at games. They would lift it up so they could really get the crowd going, get them cheering. So it was a really big deal, especially this jug was like a huge, huge thing. Now, we still have the Mountie. And you can see that image, like I said, has not really changed. He's got his floppy hat. He's got his corncob pipe. However, they do not have the spirit jug anymore. They changed that in about the 1990s because they decided it was not acceptable to have alcohol represented with a school. So the smoking's okay. But not the alcohol, not the alcohol. So, their choice. I mean, I don't know if you could have it without the pipe, really. I mean, I think that you kind of got to have that. Now, I said mascots, plural, so it also extended to soft drinks. Mountain Dew got in the game, having the hillbilly as a mascot. So they had the character Willie the Hillbilly. And Willie was the mascot for Mountain Dew starting in the 1940s. He appeared, we have it in this ad right here, but he also appeared in commercials for the brand and on packaging. And that lasted until about 1969. And when they decided in 1969 they were going to go with a new mascot, a new logo. They did bring Willie back. in 2010 for the packaging. He wasn't, I don't think he was in any commercials, but he was on packaging. And in 2020, they decided they were no longer going to use Willie again. So in 2020, they stopped using him on their packaging. I have seen a lot of like their glass bottles that he has been on glass bottles. He's been on the packages for soda cans and things like that. So for a very long time, he was a pretty popular mascot. Now today, not all production of moonshine is illegal. There are places that legally make it. Consumption of moonshine is more prevalent. You can go to Walmart and buy moonshine, and it's in all different flavors. There is a distillery in Pineville, Missouri, where they make moonshine. It's called the Tall Pines Distillery. And so you have that. They're actually the first legal distillery in McDonald County since Prohibition. So that's a pretty big deal. You still have the image of the hillbilly. It has evolved a little bit. Not a huge amount, because there's still a lot of people that look at it like, oh, you are such a hillbilly, and they do not use it in a nice way at all. But there's always going to be people that look down on people for that. But not everybody does. As we can see, like when we talked about the Dukes of Hazzard, I'm sure there are some people that look at them and say they're hillbillies, but a lot of people love the Dukes of Hazzard. And so it's really just in the eye of the beholder. A lot of people take pride in that hillbilly image. And despite whether you love hillbillies and love that image or you look down on them, that stereotype has really been solidified in our, not just pop culture, but just in our culture overall. Especially with like the making of moonshine and stuff, it is so ingrained, I think, in our history here in Northwest Arkansas. I remember several years ago when I was still in college, I went to college in Springfield in Missouri, and we had this, I don't know, some kind of festival. It was like a kind of an Ozarks festival kind of a thing, so it was focused on like our culture and our history. And I had to go to one of the lectures for a class that I was in, and it just so happened it was presented by somebody who's from the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History. And our topic just happened to be about moonshine. Of all things, that's what in our college class is what we went and got credit for, and listened. And everything I knew about moonshine up until we did this exhibit, I learned from Shiloh, because I didn't know anything. And she had such interesting stories, talking about there were people who still made moonshine in the area, not legally, but they were still making it. So it's such an important part still of our history, especially here in the Ozarks. Well, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with me today. I do just really quick, we definitely want to give thanks. In our exhibit, last call, we have borrowed several items from area museums. We borrowed from the Shiloh Museum of Ozark History, the Bella Vista Historical Museum, the Eureka Springs Historical Museum, and the Taneytown Historical Museum. So big thanks to those museums who helped us round out our displays in this exhibit. This will be on display until November 9th of this year. If you guys do ever want to come to the museum, we're open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. Admission is free every day for all the exhibits, so you don't have to pay to see anything. If you've ever been to Las Palmas here in Rogers, we are right next to Las Palmas. And if there's any other information you guys want about programming, events, exhibits, you can visit our website at rogershistoricalmuseum.org. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today.